Well, good morning, everyone. And every day we rise is a great day to be alive. And welcome to Portsmouth Coffee Talks morning show. I'm James Slim Overton, and I'm here. And we're waiting on other hosts, Leah Drake Stick, to come on. And Thomas the Colonel Chapman won't be with us today. He's out of town. And we have our guest host, a regular on the show, Mark Geduldig-Yatrofsky. And we're looking for Newport News Councilwoman Tina Vick, but we do have former Councilwoman and Vice Mayor of Portsmouth, Elizabeth Simmons. Good morning, all. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
Thank you for coming on and for this important show. We want to talk about women in local politics and the importance of it. And we all know how important it is to have representation across the board. But very seldom is talked about having representation of women. It's just if you look at the history of some of the seven cities in Hampton Roads, let's take Portsmouth. I think Elizabeth brought this up. Portsmouth, over its long history of having a city council, it's only been about 5 women that served on city council. Am I correct, Elizabeth?
That's right. Didn't start till 1980 with Gloria Webb was the first.
And then it was Gloria Webb, and then Senator Lucas, and now Senator Lucas.
Years later.
And then I think the third one was you.
The third one was Marlene Randall.
Marlene Randall. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. I was going to put her fourth, and you third.
She was third, okay. I was fourth, and then, of course, Lisa Lucas Burke is now
fifth. Wow. And that, when you think about it, that's not a whole lot. It's not that women weren't running; they just weren't getting elected. And how important do you think it is to have women representation on our city councils?
Well, I think we have to. If we look at it statistically, we have, particularly if we're talking about Portsmouth, but this is nationally as well. There are more women in the city than men. More women vote of those who are eligible to vote. About 65% of eligible women voters actually do vote. And on the male side, it's usually closer to about 50% of those who are eligible actually do vote. So, it is a better representation of the community, and that's true not only in Portsmouth but as a nation. But of course, women had a lot of catching up to do. Weren't even eligible to vote for many years. And I can't tell you prior to 1980, when Gloria Webb was elected, if there were women who actually ran who just weren't chosen. I don't know that statistic. My guess is women weren't running. They were, busy managing families and teaching. It just wasn't a thought at that point.
Well, and it's amazing. You talk about the women weren't eligible to vote, and people don't realize it wasn't too long ago before women could sign to buy a home, or get credit. We're not talking 40s and 50s. We're talking like the late 60s and 70s.
Well, within all of our lifetimes, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine, you being on city council then, but couldn't get your own credit card or buy a house.
Right.
So people don't realize how far we're not far removed away from, this being a real sexist society, which in some ways it probably still is. Mark, you've been a watcher of city council for a long time, and you address city council members in Norfolk and here in Portsmouth as well. How important do you feel it is to have the women representation on our city councils throughout the Hampton Roads area and nationally as well?
Well, I believe that every demographic needs to be represented, and this is another case of the majority being underrepresented. We have seen in Portsmouth the African American majority be underrepresented, and it's just inequitable. I really feel that elected bodies need to look like the larger constituency that they serve.
Well, and Elizabeth, and for people watching, I'm not disrespecting Elizabeth's her title, her formal title, and everything, but I've known Elizabeth for a long time, so that's the way it comes out, and that. So I call her Elizabeth. So don't get upset if you think I'm not respecting her formal title. But anyway, I just want to ask you this, because I think you were at one time. I think you and Marlene were on at the same time. Am I not mistaken?
Yes,
that probably was the only time you had two women at the same time, and that was
Gloria Webb and
Louise. I forgot about
Louise
it.
served together. Then I came on with Marlene. Then Marlene left. Then I left for 2 years. You'll recall. I came back in 2012 and was the sole woman. And then Lisa joined me in 2016. And then when I left in 2020, that left Lisa as the sole woman.
Yeah, and dealing with certain issues, I know a lot of the issues weren't, concentrating on women issues, but a lot of things, to get that perspective from women, how important was that to you to be able to add something that maybe some of the men didn't see? It might have been some
I don't
things.
think it's so much, particularly on the city council level, that it's women's issues,
Mm-hmm.
but I can tell you for sure, particularly in closed session, when people tend to get down and dirty and say exactly how they feel. Having a woman in the room can lower the temperature.
Mm-hmm.
The women, all five of us, even though I wasn't there with Mayor Webb or Councilwoman Lucas, I'm sure that they did exactly like those of us I served with were, I can tell you on more than 10 occasions did I say, gentlemen, tone it down.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember on one occasion I even said, tone it down or I'm walking out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I got up out of my chair. Because, tempers were heated, things were said that, shouldn't have been. Words were used that shouldn't have been used in polite company. And, the woman in the room can usually tone down the testosterone, so to speak. So it's not, I wouldn't say, there's nothing really on a city council agenda that's a woman's issue. But it does change the tenor of the conversation. And some men, I'm going to go so far as to say if they were raised correctly, they won't be as
they all have mothers
and ugly to a woman as they would perhaps to another man. It does change the tenor of the room to be a little more civilized.
Yes, and I was talking more, it's not a lot of women's issues, especially on the local city council, but just a different perspective that women might have as opposed to a man's thinking about.
We tend to be the moderator.
Basic issues.
Yeah.
Welcome, Leah.
Welcome. How are you all doing?
Speaking of strong women,
we were missing you.
Yeah, and Leah knows a little bit about I guess she was on the school board. It wasn't elected when you were on there, but it was appointed. But you probably can agree with Elizabeth about women being on the school board at times, sort of calming things down when it got heated in the back room. Of course, now they don't save it for the back room. They do it right on the
right out and opening
right during the public meeting. So
that's right.
Which is that's a whole nother subject as well. But give us since you just joined us, and I know what the subject is. How important is it to you having women serve on city councils or serving as well as other elected offices and appointed offices that in our cities that make decisions that are important to the citizens.
Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good
Good morning, Mark
Good
and
morning.
James. I think it's extremely important. You got to have that balance on council. You need that balance. You need someone. Women tend to not get as hot-headed, unless it's something that's really, really passionate towards for them. But women can keep that balance there. Women can kind of calm the atmosphere down. And women tend to lead, have different style of leading as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the style that women use, let's look at women who have served. They just seem to be a little more patient. They seem to be a little more take the time to work through situations and just are great leaders. I'm sorry, women are just great leaders. And I think that we're going to see a lot of this more so this year than we've seen in the past because women are advancing forward in government, and we need those women on city council. We got some strong women running. And it may make a difference. It may make a difference on council to have these women on board. So we have to look at our ladies. We have to look at what they're bringing to the table. And sometimes women are not given the same way. Something I wanted to say and it just left my head, but it'll come back to me. But I'm just thinking that we need strong female leadership on council as well. We need that balance on council. We don't need all those men up there, and forming their little alliances together. And I mean, women, we may form our alliances as well, but we're going to do it in a thoughtful manner, I think.
Yeah,
we definitely need them there.
Luckily, the locality.
In Portsmouth, we've only had Gloria Webb, Louise Lucas, Elizabeth Simmons, and Lisa Lucas. Am I correct?
And Marlene Randall.
Marlene. Oh, my heart.
Five total.
Five total. It's time
Since
for a change.
1980. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's
now
time for change.
Even though that total is low, but we are a little more advanced than it is nationally because it doesn't look like nationally the people are ready to have a woman president yet. But but locally, all the localities have had mayors, and councilwomen, but not as proportionately as it has been men. And we've seen in our history, if you look at Portsmouth, that some of the men have really, done some damage. Well, I'll just say it, done some damage. So haven't been the best leader. But
look, I always go back to Sojourner Truth, who had the women's suffrage speech when she said, "If all these men can turn the world upside down, then surely we women together can right this world upright again." So I'm thinking the year of the women is arriving. And we need to get those women up there so we can turn this thing around. I think you're going to have more visionaries when you get the women on there. And we need visionaries in the city of Portsmouth. When I look at all the other cities around us and I look at how they're growing, how they're advancing, all the great businesses that they're bringing into the city, I really feel that we get these women on council, it's going to make a difference.
I think with the current candidate list for council, particularly 11 candidates for 3 seats, but there are some outstanding women in this race. And if we're going to see a balanced council from a gender perspective, I think we have a really good shot at it this year. I've got three campaign signs on my lawn, and they're all women. So my hope is that we can make that shift this year.
And you want to make it clear that anybody that's pushing to have more representation of women on council, not doing it for the sake of just having women. We're looking at the women that are qualified, and
exactly.
and just like we talk about on this show, make sure you vet everybody, equally. But you know, if it turns out that way, but give the women an opportunity, you know, to look at them. Just don't wave them off. You know, like, and some people do. Some men do.
And they do.
You know, just tell it like it is. Some men do, and don't think they're qualified. And women can multitask much better than us. So
And we do on a daily basis.
yes.
And we do on a daily basis.
But you know, Leah had the word is collaborative, and
Mhm.
you know, you can be a visionary all you want, but if you can't get people to join you, then
Exactly.
it doesn't make any difference. And I say
Exactly.
that to people who want to run for office frequently. You know, you might make an excellent council member, but if you can't win the election, it doesn't make any difference.
Exactly.
So,
Well,
you know, it's collaboration is so key to doing any of these kind of jobs. Well, any elected position. I don't care if it's your church council or city council or school board or what have you. You've got to be able to draw in buy-in from your colleagues, or you don't get anything done. And I think that's where we are in our Portsmouth Council now. You know, there's little pockets of collaboration that don't become a whole.
Exactly.
right. And you know, the thing is always all I need is 4 votes, and that's true. But you know, and that's true in a lot of cases. But you know, if you get that 4 vote and you know 4 people voting the same way on this every time, then you kind of wonder what kind of collaboration is that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what creates discord on the council sometimes.
And yes, the other 3 have to be asked.
Right. You know, you just can't show up and say we're going to do this and say wait a minute.
Yeah.
We didn't have time to debate this. You know, so you know, and I want to ask you, Elizabeth. You know, as far as Mark mentioned about the 11 candidates and people talk about there's a lot of people, but it's been over the years in some races where it's been a lot of candidates. But how do you feel about that? You know, because sometimes when you have that many, someone who might be a good council person or good representative gets weeded out because the votes are so saturated, but you can't deny people the opportunity to run if they feel like they. But some people have to be realistic. You know, as far as running just because you can run, it's not always the best reason to run.
No, it's not. And you know, when I put on my political science degree hat that's hanging over my head back here.
Yeah, from what university?
University of Richmond.
Okay. You were close enough to Virginia Union.
Yeah, on the street. Yeah. Right city. You know, I will tell you that, you know, when there's so many candidates like that, you know, it of course always favors the incumbents.
It does. It does.
And of course, the incumbents generally have a lot more name recognition. Even if it's bad, it's still name recognition.
But they also have a record that you can check.
They have a record that they must, you know, stand by.
Right.
They can't just, you know, everybody wants to, of course, you know, supports education and public safety and economic development. And
I'm tired of that, Elizabeth. I'm so tired of that. I am so tired of that. You know,
but you know, then some get on council and then don't support those things. but we don't know that about the new people. But what you can see, and we've seen this in recent history with Mark Hugel. We saw it with Nathan Clark, where the first time they ran in a big field, they didn't win, but they got name recognition. And the second time they ran, they got on they you know, were successful. And I think we may see that with some of these newer candidates this time around because there's so many, you know. But that's just one woman's opinion.
How do you have an effective forum with 11 people on the forum? It can't be effective. You can't really get real answers. It's going to happen.
And I don't know how you can't split them up, but you know, nobody wants to sit through 11 people speaking for 5 minutes.
No.
And by the time you're to person 5, you've forgotten what person 1 said.
Exactly.
Yeah. And usually with the questions that are asked at a forum, and like I said on the show before, I'm not putting forums down. I think at one point they served this purpose, especially when you didn't have as many candidates. But still, some of the questions that I asked each person, like you mentioned, Elizabeth, everybody is concerned about economic development, schools, everybody, that's a given. That's a given. And I always encourage people, especially, like you were always out and visible. People could just walk up. And I said, just walk up to the councilman. Don't feel, intimidated by them. They're people just like you. But ask them questions that concern you, that concern your neighborhood, and that's how you get. And you can probably attest to this, Elizabeth, when people, some things you didn't know until somebody came up to you and said,
sure, absolutely.
I have this issue in Truxton.
Yeah.
Can you look into it for me?
Right. Even though I was born and raised here, there were parts of Portsmouth I'd never been to. I didn't know anything about. There were parts of like Deep Creek Boulevard I didn't know it even existed. Just never been there. Yeah. So, and I had some of my best political conversations, in the produce section of the Kroger. I'll never forget when I was very first, brand new, back when I was first elected in 2004, the elections were in the spring and we took office, on July 1st.
Yeah.
And I was in what was then the brand new Kroger out in Churchland. And it was like a Saturday morning, I had on shorts and flip-flops buying my groceries. And this sweet little woman came up to me. She looked like she was 100. She was probably 60 in retrospect. But anyway, she was a nice little old lady, all dressed very nicely. And she looked at me. She said, "You're from the city council?" I said, "Yes, ma'am. My name is Elizabeth Psimas. What's your name?" You do your own shopping? I felt like saying, the Secret Service doesn't come and do my grocery shopping for me, But it made me realize I had to think about the shorts and flip-flops in the grocery store,
But you have to be yourself. But that was my point. Some people think once you're on city council that you because
another life,
because when they come down to the chamber, you're all up here and everybody else is down there. So they put you on a level and say, I can't,
just like everybody else.
Right. I can't approach them, but that's the time. And people that run and they're elected, they realize or should realize that they give up their time. They're public servants and they give up their time. And anytime they go out, they have to be prepared to deal with the citizenry, or don't run for office. I know it can be taxing sometimes, sometimes you just want to be, left alone, but you can do that by just go shop in another city. But you still might get approached, but and then they'll say, "Why are you shopping in Suffolk?"
So, council member, would you illuminate something for me? I was under the impression, just because of how the campaign worked out, that when you ran with Councilmember Heretic and Councilmember Smith, that the three of you were actually a team. Was that in fact the way things were intended, or was it just circumstantial?
Oh no, when we were elected in 2004, I didn't know Ray Smith from a bump on a pickle. And Steve was a personal friend. He was a neighbor in Old Town, but I didn't. Ray and Steve were put together by Charles Whitehurst as a team. And then it happened the three of us were elected at the same time. I got to know Ray. The three of us then became a team, and are still lifelong friends. And if you may recall that city manager Jim Oliver at the time, who I still call the professor, called us his freshman class. And because we were learning how to be council members together. And I still, consider both my, political brothers for sure.
The Three Musketeers.
Yeah,
we still are the Three Musketeers.
and that was quite common back then. Sometimes it was politically, advantageous. I remember one time Marlene and Moody ran together on a ticket, and sometimes you saw some unlikely
I was brought
matchups.
to the table by Pitts and Ben.
Yeah.
I really kind of ran with them. So that was a very awkward election night when I won and they didn't.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and that goes to show people were voting individually and
Yeah.
not for the ticket, man. The
And
ticket.
that taught me, I always say to people now, particularly new candidates, run by yourself. Don't
Yeah.
run with somebody else.
Exactly.
Because a lot of times people, when they ran like that, they were running because they figured they needed that other person or vice versa
Yeah,
in
but you
order
can
to
also get burnt by the
yeah,
existing candidates, legacy votes, which you had
Right.
nothing to do with.
right.
Yeah.
So you don't see that too much anymore because it's just best to run individually.
And you
Yeah.
know, and also I get very disheartened when I don't see people who serve until election time. If I can only see you when it's time for you to get my vote, you don't need my vote. You need to be out there in the community. You need to be involved in the community. You people need to know that you've been there. You've been there to help people. You've been there to talk to the citizenry, and not just on council night. You know, you don't see some of them. You don't see any of them. You know, many of them until it's time for them to run again. And then they
Yeah,
want to talk about what they've done. No, you should have been out there the entire time sharing with your community what you've done. Okay, yeah, they may have seen you on city council, but there are more things going on than just the council meeting that you need to see your representatives.
Oh yeah, that's where your time and your work is. It's not on Tuesday night.
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. It was nice to see a council person at an Earth, Wind, and Fire show, right, Elizabeth?
Yeah, absolutely.
But Elizabeth, I want to ask you. You know, we touched on the regionalism a little earlier, and how was it? You know, it was more that at one point than I see now. Maybe it's still going on, but I don't see it, and maybe I'm not as connected as I used to be. But how was it when you were on there and interacting with other women on other city councils?
Oh,
What was some of the
the
comments?
women in the region were very supportive of each other. And I continued a tradition that Mamie Locke, who was in the Virginia General Assembly, did from when I was first elected in 2004. Mamie Locke sent me a congratulatory card with a nice note in it. And I didn't know Mamie Locke at all, except, I knew who she was, but I did not know her. And so that started me sending cards to other women who were elected in the region. And then I took it one step further, and in the police and fire, in our Portsmouth police and fire departments, as we had women, we had a woman who became battalion chief. We had a few women who became pretty high up in the police department. I always sent a card or flowers or something supporting other women. And, I think we all connect again on a regional basis, in our city councils. We're not Republicans and Democrats. That has no meaning at all on a city basis. So, it's just supporting other women. No, and that's honestly, I don't see that any different as the deltas supporting the deltas or the omegas supporting the omegas. It's just a thing. I know.
As long as they're qualified, long as they're
Yeah,
qualified.
I always stayed in pretty close touch with Andrea McClellan. And now I'm drawing a blank on the woman who was mayor of Suffolk. Blonde woman. I'm drawing a total blank. I'm sorry.
Yes, I know who you're talking about too.
Linda Johnson.
Yeah.
Different ones. And of course, we talked about Myra Obendorf before we started, and those women who and Louise Lucas, pioneered this thing. Everybody's been very supportive. And I've been to other cities. I recall I went out to Suffolk to a women in politics panel that was maybe 6 or 8 of us from all over the region. Some were in the General Assembly, some were in city government, and or city managers, that sort of thing, and I think we just tend to be supportive of each other, no matter your politics. We can stand above the politics because on the local level, let's face it, we're talking about safety and trash and things like that. We're not talking about abortions and guns and things that people get so wound up about.
So the school board in Portsmouth has had a very high representation of women particularly in recent years. And that's interesting because the school board is so often an incubator for city council and other local offices. Initially, as our lead host, Mr. Overton, stated, Ms. Stith was appointed back in the day. And so you had to cross that hurdle of a male-dominated city council appointing a woman to the school board, but then it became elective. And, women have really taken their place on an elected school board.
And to Elizabeth's point earlier about and Leah's about the calmness of women. If they're having disagreements, we don't know about it.
You don't know about it. You don't know about it. I mean,
and if you ask them, they'll tell you they do.
Exactly.
They do have disagreements. I'm talking about the full school board, and it's dominated by women. And that's the people's choice. That's the people's choice that they made. But if they're having disagreements, you don't hear about it. You just hear about some of the things that happen. So maybe that should tell us something.
You just answered your own question, Mr. Overton.
I sure did, didn't I?
It's interesting in the region. There has never been a female mayor of Norfolk, has there?
No.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that. You're right.
It has not.
I think every other city has had them, except.
What about Chesapeake and Hampton?
I don't think Chesapeake has. Hampton has. Jessie Radley was.
Yes, I forgot about Jessie Radley.
She was a pioneer. I think she was the first one to serve as a mayor throughout all the cities, if I'm not mistaken. And then Newport News has had. They've had a mayor. Her name was Sharon Scott. So she was mayor from 2000 to 2010. So most all the cities have had one except the city of Norfolk.
Because Norfolk's had a lot of strong women in the General Assembly and other
Dawn
things.
Hester. Dawn Hester.
They jumped all past the mayorship. Just let me go where I can get things done.
Well, that's the thing. So Norfolk has done a lot of flip-flopping of sending people to the General Assembly and then back to constitutional officers.
Exactly.
Which of course is a more permanent position and way better pay.
Right.
And retirement and all that good stuff. Of course, then there's the new pay scale, but we won't talk about that. That's a different.
Why not talk about
that?
That brings heartburn to my heart. Believe me.
As a former member of council, and how do you feel about that? Because I think Ray was on here last week, and he said it wasn't true that the last pay raise was in the 90s, because he said when he was on there, the city manager put in the budget to raise. That's when it went to 25,000.
Yeah,
and but that was just a city manager move, which evidently he could do that.
Yeah,
but
it wasn't a big step. It was like for council
from 18 to 23 or something.
$2,000. It wasn't an 80% jump.
Yeah,
right.
It is. I think it should have been an incremental increase. I could taste that a little better, and it just hurts my heart when I see council people who meet once a month maybe twice a month. Maybe they may have a few more meetings in between, or they have boards and commissions that they serve on that they don't attend the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Yet and still, they now make more than some of the city workers who work 40 hours a week.
No, I agree
Yeah.
100%.
How do you justify that? You know,
I know Elizabeth agreed. She, I remember when I was on the EDA, and I think Elizabeth, you were one of the council liaisons. Even though you could speak up, you didn't have a vote, but you were at every meeting, and if you had a question, you could participate like that and take information back to the city council. But we were pretty much a board or that acted on its own. We had our own treasurer, and we could buy and sell land in the interest of the city of Portsmouth. And but I understand, now some council members don't attend some of the liaison meetings, which
and that's the purpose of them going, so they can come back to the council and share with the council what is taking place at the meeting. And many of them are surprised on council. You can tell they're surprised when information comes up about the committees that they serve on, and they don't know the issues that are being discussed. How do you hold them more accountable? You got to have some accountability here.
Well, that's what we talk about on the show. It's a matter of the citizens paying attention to what's going on and not waiting to the last 3 months before the election and take all that in, because it's all going to look good coming from the candidates or especially the incumbents, and not taking anything away from the incumbents. That's the campaign season is what it is. You get out there and push, but you got to look beyond that. How they voted on certain issues that might be of interest to you and things like that.
So this is not quite as elevated a talking point as some of the others, but would you like to offer an opinion on the nameplates, councilwoman versus council member? Let me state, since I have the mic at the moment, I'm partial to council member because it's across the board. But the only person who actually carried that title was Ms. Randall when she was on council. People referred to her as council member Randall as opposed to councilwoman or councilman. But I like the equity of council member. How do you feel?
Honestly, I don't think I ever thought about it. I don't care if you call me councilman. As long as you recognize Psimas on the ballot, right? I don't know that I ever thought about it. I always referred to myself as councilwoman, but I don't think titles are not. I always said that the title's not important. It's doing the job.
Exactly.
The title is not who I am.
So Elizabeth,
I can't say for.
Go ahead.
Every member.
What made you decide that it was time to give up the hat?
Well, as we were coming into, I decided in late, 2020 that I was not going to stand for re-election. Basically, I thought it was time for some new blood. I was getting very tired of the racial tension that had bubbled up at that point. And, at my age, I'm 66 now, I thought I was going to spend more time selling travel and traveling because my traveling had definitely been curtailed by my council duties. And of course, what I didn't know was that COVID would enter the picture and cut everything out of the picture. But, recalling history, my decision and my announcement happened long before we had all the hoopla about, Confederate monuments and all that was all before that. That was in the last, 6 months of my tenure that all of those things happened that summer. But it was the right decision for me at the time, for sure. And, people stop me all the time. People still call me and ask me questions about things. And, I'll point them in the right direction, where to get, who to call to get something done. And sometimes it's call your council member. But it's nice when people say, we miss you, or wouldn't you like to come back? Wouldn't you like to come back now and make $40,000 a year?
You're gonna have Elizabeth. You're gonna have everybody. You have everybody in the rug racks out there running for that $40,000 a year,
which is crazy.
Especially those with no employment.
It's I always say I miss the good work I did with the good people I worked with. And that's not the Tuesday night meetings. Again, that's the great work behind the scenes that many of us did back in those days. And, working with, the Economic Development Authority or the Military Affairs Committee or working with the police and fire unions, those were the things I spent the most time on and thoroughly enjoyed, Yeah,
and then that's where a lot of the work gets done, and a lot of times what you see at the meetings now is drama. But Elizabeth, I want to take you back. Leah asked you about.
Can I just say one thing before you do that, James? On this deciding when it's time to give it up. I'm thinking about the young lady in Norfolk, Danica Royster, who's very, very responsive, even to people who are not in her district. When you call her, she responds within 24 hours to you. And when she told me she wasn't going to run again, I said, well, you were appointed first, and you've only served one term. She said, when I served, I made a decision what my projects were, what my goals were going to be. She said, I've reached those goals. So now it's time for me to move on. So it's important to know when to hold them and know when to fold it. She said, I've done what I came to do, and now it's time to pass it on to somebody else. Sometimes we get so enthralled with power that we don't see when we become ineffective. We don't realize when we become ineffective. We just want the power or the name that comes with the position that we serve. So I want to commend her as a female council person in Norfolk who decided it was time. It was time to move on.
Yeah, so everybody has their own timetable, and she had a very short one, and other people have a timetable, and after 4 years, they have some things they want to do. But Elizabeth, I want to take you back to, I want to know, when you were coming up, was it a political household you came up in? And when you were at the Tristan High, like Ray always comes up here and talk about, he got involved in politics with Dolores Overton when we were in high school. They were my classmates. And I remember them being very involved in high school. Did anything happen at Tristan High, or did you have a political household, were your parents political, that sort of guide you into politics when it came to the point where people saying, look, why don't you run? Where did it start with you?
Well, my mom and dad were always sort of, involved in the, lick 'em and stick 'em envelopes. And I remember going with my mom to it's one of the stores downtown to do lick envelopes for Lester Schlitz and
wow.
Some others.
Takes me back.
And then when I was in college, not so much in high school, but in college, I was a card-carrying member of the Young Republicans, and I actually went to the Republican National Convention when Ronald Reagan was selected, which was fascinating because there were lots of movie stars there. And I worked vigorously in college on a couple of campaigns, and then came back home to Norfolk, and then later on to Portsmouth, and got more interested, I'd say after I opened my business in 88, I was very interested then because, I had a business on High Street, and, now it really mattered. And that's back when Ward Robinette and Jimmy Hawks and Mo Whitlow, kind of right after Dick Davis, that crowd, and they all kind of got me involved. They got me all involved in, serving on some boards and things like that. And actually, funny story, in whatever the year was that Bill Moody first came to council.
98.
It was 98. So I had been asked by some of that crowd to run, and I said, I'm too young in my business. I can't take the time to do that. Thank you very much, but this is not the good time for me. And Bill ended up going on the ballot as a team with Ward Robinette, and won. Well, at the time, Moody was the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, which in those days was a really big job. I was vice chair, so that moved me up to being chairman because Moody went to council. And then at the next election cycle, I joined Moody on the council and gave up my seat on the chamber and on the Portsmouth partnership because of that. So it was there is a progression to things, but and I've obviously I took a political science degree, and I've always been interested in politics. So it probably started with those licking envelopes down at, I think it was the old Mervis's store where we did the envelopes for Lester Schlitz. Yeah.
So if I could, off your statement about the chamber, which were you in terms of female leadership of the chamber? Were you one of the early ones?
Well, there were very few. I hadn't thought about that, Mark, but I don't recall. Ann Davis and I were both very active, and I don't remember. And I think Ann followed me as chairman. And back in the partnership in those days, the person who was the chamber president, chairman, had a seat, an ex officio seat on the partnership. And the partnership had me and Ann Davis and Peggy Murphy from Action Oldsmobile. And that was it for a very long time. There may be other women on the partnership board now, but it was Ann and Peggy and I for a long, and Diane Griffin. But we were certainly in the minority.
How does that contrast with today?
I don't know. The last time I went to the Portsmouth Chamber board meeting, I was invited as a speaker. It was my last year on council, so that was 2020, 4 years ago. The majority of the people in the room were female. But that's, I think the Portsmouth Chamber now is much more geared to small businesses, which tend to be run by women, as opposed to like a Virginia Beach Chamber where you've got bigger national manufacturing companies and things like that, which are pretty much male dominated. But I mean, you look at your bankers now, but many of your bank presidents and vice presidents are female. The world has changed.
That's right. The world is changing. The world is changing.
Yeah. And I agree with Slim said earlier, I don't ever vote for somebody because they are female.
Thank you. I was about to say that.
That's not it.
Exactly.
There are a whole lot of criteria you got to meet first before I'll even consider voting for you. It's like, I recall in the last cycle of council elections 2 years ago, there was a fairly new candidate running, and somebody said, well, why are you supporting him? Is he a Republican or a Democrat? I said, I have no idea, and I don't care. He's got a mind. He knows how to make a decision. He knows how to ask questions. I don't care what his national politics are. This is Portsmouth we're talking about. This is my safety, my trash, my education. I don't care how they feel about national issues. They're not going to appoint the Supreme Court.
Exactly. And like you said, Elizabeth, we're not here advocating to vote all women.
No,
We're here to say that the candidates pick the best candidate out of the group who's running. There are only 3 seats available. It's important that you vet each of those candidates and get the best person for the job.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're just saying it's good to have your council reflect
exactly
your city. Yeah, if you have a lot of women in your city, you should have that proper representation, just like any other thing you might want to look at, as far as if you want more African Americans on there, because you have a large contingent of African American people, there should be representation. It looks funny when you have a mix of everybody and your council is all one way, so you're not going to get, the experiences that people bring to the council is going to be different. It's going to be different from a woman and a man, the way you think, so you want that kind of diversity. You get all men, all of them thinking together, or they're going to all fight each other like we've seen. So, but, anyway, and that's all we're saying. And Leah, you're right, and Elizabeth, make sure, you might want another woman, but make sure they're qualified. You vet them just as rigorously as you would anybody else, But, and if you have 3 women running and none of them fit the bill, maybe next time. Oh, well. Yeah.
That's right. Because right now, what Portsmouth needs strong thinkers. Portsmouth needs strong visionaries.
Critical thinking.
In order for them to advance like the other cities are advancing, you have to have people who can think through situations and not just react to situations. People who are active in the community, people who are active, who attend their meetings, who are there, who read the information before the night of the council meeting. So you're not surprised when they bring the information up at council. So you have to have great thinkers on there and visionaries. So we need a change. But we need to make sure we put the right people in place. Because what change? One person who's not doing the work, put another person on there who's not going to do the work. You've not done anything at all. So
my pet peeve on any council member is, we all know, particularly the 4 of us here, the packet of information that is provided to council members before the meeting, a week or more before the meeting, is very thorough. And Bernard Griffin taught me this when I came on board, because he had retired when I came on. And he said, watch your council members, read the information you get, and you can tell who hasn't read their packet by the types of questions they ask. And sure enough,
we always say that here.
I can look at a meeting and I don't have to have looked at the packet. I can know full well that information would have been in their packet had they bothered to open it and read it. And sometimes, and I have done this myself, a council member will ask a question publicly because they want the public to hear the answer from the city manager or the department. Right. Sometimes you ask a question for education, but some of the questions I hear council members ask are just silly. They're in the workbook. They should have known the answer.
Exactly.
And sometimes, Elizabeth, you can tell, if the council person is asking a question just to make sure the public, and sometimes they'll say it just so the public will know.
Yeah, city manager, could you explain why we are doing so and so?
Right.
Yeah.
And but
some of those questions, you say,
yeah,
surely they have not done their homework before sitting here on this dais.
Right.
Yeah. And like you said, Elizabeth, I know when I was on the school board, we get those packages in advance. Yeah. You had to read those packages before the night of the school board meeting, to be prepared.
Well, the ones that kill me are if it is a public hearing on a use permit for a building, and somebody will say, now, is that the green building on the corner of so and so? It's like, did you not read it? Did you not ride by and take a look?
How about that?
It's not like we're a big place, If you weren't familiar, get in your car and go look yourself.
Do your homework.
Or, and sometimes circumstances can keep you from having, not all the time, but you might not have read. So you admit that. You say, well, I hadn't had a chance to really
Exactly.
review that. So bring me up to speed on that. That's the way you handle things. You show your not vulnerability, but you show when times come up. You don't try to fake it.
Right.
If you haven't read the information, just let them say, hey, "Look, I didn't have time to review this, so
I've been
this is
away.
what
I just
this
got
is.
back
I've been
last week.
away. My wife was in the hospital. Whatever. You want to reveal as far as that's concerned, but just be open with it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm asking this. So the city manager won't say, well, sir, it was in your packet.
Yeah.
So, but, so, and it's just the way it's easy for us to look back on it. But to me, this is a simple thing. That's why I encourage people to, if you can, you don't have to serve on some board of commission, because that helps you usher you into what you might be seeing once you're on city council. Some of the things, because I know on the planning commission, you definitely have to read that information,
Oh, for
or
sure.
you'll look like a pure fool up there asking questions that even people in the audience know.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're winding down here, and I want to thank everybody for coming on. And we usually give everybody to have a last comment. One thing I want to start with you, Elizabeth. If you were in front of some young ladies or women in general, and you were speaking to them, what would your advice be to them as far as if they were thinking about entering into politics or into local politics?
Well, I always warn people that, male or female, think about your history, think about your past. What is the first question I always ask somebody is, if I do opposition research on you, what am I going to find that's going to steer me away from you?
Yeah. Do you have any bankruptcy?
You did something silly in college, maybe you declared bankruptcy a few years ago, anything that might be considered a negative. The other thing I will usually say to particularly young women is, depending on your personal life, think about, can is your spouse or partner or parents or whomever is important in your life supportive of this endeavor? Because if you don't have somebody else in your household that is supportive of you, doing this work, you're going to fail, or you're going to be wearing yourself out. If you're, and I think this has kept a lot of women from being active in the past. If you have young children, do you have a support system? Is your husband there to really help you, not for Tuesday night meetings, but for the rest of the stuff?
Mhm.
And I think, for example, like Sarah Duncan Hines, who I lovingly call my political daughter, who I think has done a fantastic job with the school board and pretty much anything else she attempts to do. But Sarah is retiring this year, and part of that, not to tell Sarah's personal life, but she's got a young child. They're very involved in sports. They've got older parents, and she knows this is a time she needs to devote to family. So she's giving up the school board seat to do the family time. And I think we all have to be realistic about that.
Exactly.
More particularly women, because women tend to be in charge of the family structure. So know what your limits are. I think is maybe, in my case, I wanted to go out and have more fun, and COVID stopped that in its tracks. But I'm making up for it now.
Yeah.
Well, Elizabeth, I want to say thank you for coming on for some coffee talk. There's one thing about Elizabeth: when she did serve on council, she was very, very visible. I can always see her down at the coffee shop or down at that little stop by the ferry landing. She would always be there. She was always open and accessible for you to sit down and talk with her. And she was willing to share information. And for that, Elizabeth, I want to say thank you so very much. And I think that you can teach some others a lesson in being visible as a council person within the community.
Yeah.
Visibility is very important for people to see and to know who you are and to be able to ask questions of you when they see you, and not someone to just brush you off, or just give you a pat answer so that you will go away. That doesn't serve any purpose at all. And also involvement in the community. Involvement in the community is extremely important. So I just want to say thank you so very much for coming on Portsmouth Coffee Talk. I want to say thank you for your service. And I want to say thank you for being one of our female leaders, which we need more of. Once again, I want to say vet the candidates. Do your check off list. What things are important? Check them off. If somebody doesn't meet that criteria, cross that name off and move on to the next person. But we need you to vet strongly. Too many people running. We have to make sure that the right people are placed on council this election in November. So once again, thank you, Elizabeth, so very much. And Mark, I love you.
Mark, you have anything?
Yes, thank you, hosts, for putting this together. It's really nice when you have a resource like Councilmember Psimas to come and pull the curtain back so the people of the city can see what actually goes on when they're not around, when they're not in the chamber, when the camera is not recording. Because so much of city business is really done that way.
Sure.
Yeah, I like to say, it's a saying that in politics there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. I see it a little different. It's a matter of friendship and respect.
Exactly.
And I'll tell this short story about Elizabeth. One time I was downtown, and I took a picture with her, and she said, "You mind if I use this on my campaign?" I said, "Sure." At the time, and then the group that I was a part of at the time, we had committed to support somebody else, and I had to call Elizabeth and say, "The group I'm in, I'm committed to them, and they decided to pick somebody else. Can you not use that picture on your campaign?" And I knew she was upset because I think it had already gone to press, if I'm not mistaken. And she said, "Okay, well, that's the way you feel." But I know she was mad, and she probably said a few choice words, but she never stopped speaking to me. Like right now, it's a council member that doesn't speak to me because of some of the things probably we said on the show.
I got one, don't speak to me either, but it's okay.
Yeah. So, and we say on here, it's never personal. And what I have been doing over the years, as far as campaigning and who I support, it's never really personal against the other person, because I always respect whoever's running. Unless they talk about my mama, then it's a big different story. But anyway, I always have respect for her for that, and having to call her, and because of my commitment to that other group, to that particular group. But at the time, I was fully supporting her, and I just appreciated her willingness to, accept that and not hold it against me for the rest of my life. So I appreciate that. And Elizabeth, you mentioned about some of the reasons you left. One of the reasons you left was because of the the tension, the racial tension that was building up during your tenure, during the end of your tenure. And you said, I've been in here a long time. I'm not ready for that. So I understand, getting away, because it even seems like now we're going backwards. So, but
exactly.
It's a matter of just putting Portsmouth first. If you're a citizen of Portsmouth, and you can have your interests and your agenda, but you have to put the whole city first.
Yeah.
Or we're not going to move forward as a city.
Exactly.
So, but I appreciate you coming on, and hope to have you on some other times to talk about other issues. Since we respect the time you served as a city council person and vice mayor. So thank you for coming on, and we'll see you next time. And thanks for agreeing to come on. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. And remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share this show. And we'll see you next time. Oh, and remember, during the summer, we will not be doing the Thursday evening show, so we can attend the Thursday the Thursday shows in
Thursday.
the city of Portsmouth. We will have one show on the 18th of July because I committed. So it'll be the Delaware State Alumni Association. So we like to feature our HBCUs. So we will do that. But for the rest of the summer, the Thursday evenings, we won't have those until after August. But you're going to have to get up early to see us live. If you don't get up early, you can go to our YouTube page and watch us from now until eternity. So thanks a lot. We appreciate you and take care. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.